It's a huge day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Not only do we have bannings and unbannings to talk about, but there's really positive news concerning Outlaws of Thunder Junction to talk about as well.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a glorious installment of Mega Magic News. Wizards of the Coast has just dropped a big banned and restricted announcement on us with a ton of details. So if you're annoyed with the announcements they've given in the past where they gave no details or they went, hey, check out play boosters, that's all we have to say, you will be much happier with this. We're going to go through it step by step and check out all the details. This announcement has already caused movement in Magic markets, so people are making singles purchases based on what's going on here. And speaking of singles purchases, you need to hear about this video's sponsor and stick around to the end of the spot because it's hilarious. When it comes to getting Magic cards, it can be a time-consuming and costly endeavor. Either you're overpaying by getting all your cards from one source, they charge crazy prices, or you have to order from 30 different people just to build a deck. Well, that's where Card Trader comes in, simplifying everything for you. Not only do they have a ton of worldwide sellers, but they have a service called Card Trader Zero. And how it works is, instead of having all these different shipments come to you, they will get shipped to Card Trader, and then Card Trader will send you it all in one easy shipment whenever you want it. That saves you on shipping costs, and on top of that, they have a guarantee that says if any of the cards that are sent don't meet the standards they're supposed to, Card Trader will replace them before sending the package to you. That is unheard of. And as an added bonus, they've given me a code. My bones hurt. Use my code, you get 5% off your purchase. And on top of that, you support my channel at the same time. That's a double win. Big thank you to Card Trader for sponsoring this video. Go check them out right now to save yourself some time and some money. And if you're one of those weird freaks who likes games like Porkman or Yarbano, you can get those too. So not only do we have the banning and unbanning to talk about, but Thunder Junction itself is looking super positive. Wizards of the Coast just released the first story installment for the set, and it is actually an enjoyable story. I have covered it over on my Fantasy Geographic channel. The video is already out. So after we're done talking about all of this craziness and what Wizards of the Coast has changed in the different formats, we can enjoy some magical story time together. Now, let's go check out the banned and restricted announcement. All right, there's a lot of meat to this announcement, so let's dive right in. We start at the top. As we discussed during our most recent banned and restricted announcement on December 4th at the end of last year, we planned today's announcement such that we could observe and gather data from recent events both before and after the release of Karlov Manor. Since the beginning of the new year, we've seen nearly a full season of standard regional championship qualifiers, a full season of modern regional championships, and the Pioneer Pro Tour at MagicCon Chicago. With that information under our belts, we'll dive into the health of each format individually, whether a change has been made or not. Additionally, if you'd like to hear more about the thoughts on these formats, you can tune in tomorrow, March 12th, for Weekly MTG to hear more on that. And I have to say, they have provided a lot of details here, which I appreciate. We've seen previous announcements where we got pretty much no details, or in some cases, just a sales announcement. So I appreciate them explaining the thought process underneath it all. We're going to start out with Standard. So it says, a little more than 10 months ago, we set out to revitalize Standard. We updated the rotation, tweaked our banning philosophy, added more events and opportunities to play, and released several new sets. And we're thrilled to say that Standard is incredibly healthy right now, both in terms of the play environment and the interest in playing the format. Now, this is corporate language. Let's be very, very clear that when they said we set out to revitalize Standard and they updated the rotation, that was a knee-jerk reaction that didn't improve Standard. I don't believe that adding a third year on has made the format better at all, and I don't believe that Standard is an incredibly healthy format. I believe that Standard is improving because I'm seeing some people playing Standard at game stores and stuff instead of nobody playing. But this is overly optimistic language that does not reflect reality as far as I'm concerned. It continues. Over the past year, the number of players participating in tabletop Standard play has trended upwards, culminating this past week with numbers higher than any other week since the pandemic. There are more than triple the number of tickets, individual entries into an event. So tickets are what Wizards of the Coast uses to determine engagement at local game stores. So if you go in and play in an event, that counts as one ticket. Wizards has a certain amount of tickets that a store needs to hit to basically hit different levels in the WPN partner program or to even remain in the program. Now, the fact that there's more tickets is a good sign, but we're also looking at the worst time in Standard they're comparing it to. So it's like saying 3 is 3 times 1, where you go, wow, but at the same time, it's still only 2 more, right? So you got to remember that when it comes to this multiplication math, it's easy to be disingenuous. So it says, in fact, Standard has now returned to being the most played 60-card tabletop format, in addition to remaining the most played digital format. So thank you to all the players and stores that explored Standard and found it really ... fun. The fact that they put the ellipses in there almost makes me feel like they're trolling us and like, hey, we're glad you guys found Standard fun. Like it's a weird choice to me. Anyways, as alluded, Standard looks healthy and fun, with each macro archetype having multiple flavors and new cards from Karlov Manor making an impact. Cards like Novice Inspector and Case of the Gateway Express have powered up Boros Convoke, while No More Lies has elevated Azorius Control. Trusty Domain and Esper mid-range decks remain strong, and nearly all decks have adapted the new Surveil lands. We've even seen some exciting new combo decks with cards like Steam Core Scholar. that's the lightning elemental they painted the hat onto. This one makes me laugh. Oh yeah, by the way, is this something that you guys find chuckle-worthy, the whole painting of hats onto dudes? All right, so we've seen some exciting new combo decks with cards like Steam Core Scholar, Reenact the Crime, and Conspiracy Unraveler. Perhaps one of the more interesting developments in Standard comes from the winner of the $75,000 Open at MagicCon Chicago, whose deck featured Aftermath Analyst, Nissa Resurgent Animist, and Slogurk the Overslime. What a name. Slogurk, that's such a cool name, right? Okay, so it says, with a larger card pool than ever, players are having fun seeing what winning strategies they can concoct in this new, larger sandbox of cards. As such, we have no changes for Standard and are excited to see what players cook up for Thunder Junction in April. So, in terms of these bans, I mean, Sheoldred is a real house, but isn't completely dominating things to the point where it needs a ban. So ultimately, this, as far as it goes, seems fine to me. Moving on to Pioneer. We've made a few changes during our last announcement with the goal of setting the stage for a more fun and diverse Pioneer metagame. The Pioneer Pro Tour at MagicCon Chicago has played on that new stage. Recent sets continue to impact the format, with cards printed over the last year appearing in Topps decks. We have No More Lies, Deduce, and Meticulous Archive in Azorius Control. Amalia as the centerpiece of her namesake creature combo deck, Picklock Prankster, and Sleight of Hand. Oh, weird, it's not highlighting that one. Sleight of Hand adding consistency to Izzet Phoenix. Archdruid's Charm providing utility to Lotus Field combo, but the breakout deck of the tournament was a variation on Rakdos midrange featuring our old friend Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord, and his new best friend Vane Ripper. Wizards has to be happy that we've got a mythic from Markov Manor making an appearance on the stage, right? So, this deck took down the whole event. Congrats to the Channel Fireball team, the winning pilot, and the deck's creator. The recently unbanned Smuggler's Copter also made an appearance in the aforementioned Rakdos Vampire deck, as well as Izzets and Soul lists. With new cards impacting the format and a slew of viable strategies, Pioneer's in a great spot, and it's going to have no changes. That makes sense to me. Explorer is the same difference as Pioneer, so that has no real changes. Now, Modern is where we see a big shakeup that actually is causing movement in the markets as well. We'll read the announcement, then we'll talk about the market movement. So, Violent Outburst is banned, and you'll remember from the video I talked about the potential targets, this was one of the cards that I had mentioned. So, in our previous Modern update, we removed Fury and up the Beanstalk from the environment. Doing so has returned Rakdos midrange to an acceptable level without deleting it from the metagame entirely. Since then, we've seen Temur Rhinos, Living End, Golgari Yawgmoth, Amulet Titan, and Izzet Murktide rise in metagame share. More recently, players have had some success with Leyline of the Guild Pact from Karlov Manor in Domain Zoo, and Rhinos variants that feature Scion of Draco and Leyline Binding. Here we go. Apparently I forgot to highlight all those cards, so there you go, in case you want to see what they look like. Last time I did this, I did it on my phone, reading off my phone. So I figured this way, where I can highlight the cards, would be better for you guys. So let me know in the comments whether you like this approach better, or you like the other way, where I'm going off the phone in front of the green screen. It's up to you. So, over the past regional championship season, Rhinos has begun to approach previous levels of Rakdos mid-range metagame dominance. While we want to preserve the Cascade strategies as viable options in Modern, we'd like to remove one of the more powerful aspects of their strategy, namely the ability to cascade into a payoff card at instant speed. You'll recall when I talked about the bannings that would happen, this is the last legal instant speed Cascade card. So this is them closing that window, because Cascade is super powerful, right? Now, it says casting Violent Outburst during an opponent's turn reduces a lot of the risk inherent in such a strategy. It allows the Cascade player to untap with all their mana open and Rhino tokens or cycling creatures ready to attack. It's true, getting to play on your opponent's turn is way more potent. Both decks also include Force of Negation, which costs 0 mana on opponent's turns, enabling a streamlined defense of the combo. So Outburst is banned. Removing it from the format will necessitate Cascade players to adopt Ardent Plea or Demonic Dread and force them to play on their own turn more often, weakening both Cascade strategies and reducing them to an acceptable level of metagame share, much like the Fury ban did to Rakdos midrange. So, Violent Outburst is gone. Oh, there's the violent. Oh, man, Force of Negation is such a powerhouse card, dude. Anyhow, like they said, this will necessitate Cascade players moving to Plea or Dread, and it seems like the market has spoken. Ardent Plea appears to be the new one that everybody's going for, because there has been a massive market spike on Ardent Pleas. That is interesting to note, but it also makes perfect sense, right? Once Wizards removes something from a deck and goes, you can't use this anymore, the scramble is on to find replacement pieces to still make the deck work. And Cascade is strong enough that this isn't going to completely neuter the deck, right? It's just going to take it down to being a level that's not too insane. And this also speaks to most likely what we're going to see in Modern Horizons 3 as well, because I posited in my previous video that part of the reason they might want to remove this instant speed Cascade is they intend on bringing in more free cast spells. We see how well they did in Modern Horizons 2, right? Cards like Fury had to get got because they were so powerful. So Wizards of the Coast, I very much believe, is going to lean more into the freestyle spells, and we've already seen one in the form of that one sorcery that you can sack a creature to cast instead. So more things along those lines. Wizards trying to circumvent casting costs. Casting costs are the biggest balancing mechanic in Magic the Gathering, and it does feel in recent years like Wizards almost resents having to respect casting costs. So more and more, especially for formats outside of Standard, they're leaning into this free play stuff, and I expect to see some free cast with alternate cost crazy spells coming out in Modern Horizons 3. This definitely leans into that. Now, next up is Legacy. The Legacy format has changed slightly since we last checked in, mainly with the inclusion of broadside bombardiers in both Goblin and Red Prison decks. I love the artwork. These Goblin pirates with their cannons, they're fun. Okay, anyways, control, combo, and tempo decks, in addition to these updated red decks, all jockey for position at the top of the metagame, giving players plenty of options to choose. Orcish Bowmasters has crept into many of the macro strategies featured in Delver of Secret tempo variants, including Sultai Control and Reanimator. While the play rate of Orcish Bowmasters isn't quite at the level of format staples like Brainstorm, Ponder, and Force of Will, it is something we're keeping an eye on. For the time being, we're happy with the fact that many different decks can win at the top levels of Legacy. Let's be very, very real about this one in particular. Orcish Bowmasters is such a problematic card that Wizards of the Coast has said that going forwards, they're going to design more creatures with 2 toughness so that they won't be hosed by Orcish Bowmasters. That speaks to the power level of the card, and I absolutely believe the only reason they're bringing it up this way is because they haven't sold through all of the Lord of the Rings stuff, and once they do sell through all the Lord of the Rings stuff, Orcish Bowmaster is going to end up getting the boot. Because literally, if you have to fundamentally alter card design going forwards for the rest of Magic, and then later on you're just going to create another Bowmaster because of how well Bowmaster did, but now it's going to do 2 damage, it's this power creep cycle that's absolutely unsustainable. So I totally do see a change in the future where Bowmasters will get the boot. Now, let's talk about an unbanning. This doesn't happen too frequently, especially like Vintage. Wizards of the Coast doesn't seem to care as much about the older formats, so it's always interesting to see when they're making moves in those regards, because those formats make them the least amount of money. They can't really print cards directly into the format. The power level of the format is such that making sets like Modern Horizons 3 won't really have the same level of change, right? The kind of forced rotation. Ultimately, what Wizards is trying to do with these modern sets and stuff like that is force rotation into non-rotating formats so that you have to acquire new cards and the dominant meta shifts. That's the ultimate strategy that they use. So when it comes to monitoring Vintage and making changes for it, that just feels like something that's not 100% greedy and monetarily based, and it's just trying to maybe extend things out. I mean, you could say on one hand, by unbanning cards, they are creating an extra demand for the cards, and then they can include them in other things to sell. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a natural, organic way to create demand for Magic cards, and I have no problem with that. And the idea of shrinking ban lists as you progress and cards aren't as much of a problem is also a great idea. So let's talk about how now Ponder is unrestricted. Unrestricted, unbanned, those two are used interchangeably for me here, all right? So restricted means you can only play 1 copy. Now you can play 4 copies. Ponder has been restricted in Vintage since 2008. It's not necessarily true that we want to reintroduce every card that's been restricted for over a decade, but evidence suggests Ponder is ready to come back into the 4-of club. While not much has changed in Vintage since our last announcement, we believe that spell-based combo decks in Vintage could use a little boost. The top of the metagame features decks like Lurrus Saga, Initiative, and Mishra's Workshop shells. Even if many of the Lurrus decks contain blue, they generally feature 0 copies of Ponder. While this shouldn't cause a huge shift, it should give a few percentage points back to decks looking to find specific cards to enact their strategy more consistently. This honestly makes me wish that more formats weren't fully being monitored by Wizards of the Coast, because this sort of half hands-off approach, but we're going to review the cards that have been banned based on the power scope. Because understand, when they're talking about Lurrus decks, Mishra Workshop shells, all these kind of things are really benefiting from a few new cards that they've made in Commander decks or other places that have made their way into Vintage. So newer cards are more powerful than older cards. And while Ponder is still a powerhouse card, the overall power pool that Vintage has to draw on has changed, and Wizards has been pushing creatures more and more and more, while sorceries and instants, yes, there are a bunch of powerful ones, but they have actually taken more of a back seat as times progressed, with creatures getting bumped and bumped and bumped. So the idea of going back and reevaluating cards that have been banned for at least a decade, the entire nature of Magic has shifted greatly since then, and we've seen a huge influx of cards since then as well. So I, for one, am glad to see that not everything Wizards is doing is purely based on short-term gain, and some of it is based on long-term stewardship. Because paying attention to Vintage and Legacy falls into that category for me. Those are the formats that they stand to benefit the least from monetarily paying a bunch of attention to, and the fact that they pay any attention at all is heartening. Combine that with the fact that the Magic storyline is moving in a better direction, that's absolutely heartening as well. So I encourage you, my friends, go check out the first installment of the Thunder Junction story. It's over on my lore channel, Fantasy Geographic, for you to enjoy right now. I'll be live streaming on my other channel tonight if you want to come by and hang out. Big thank you to the channel's patrons and members. I appreciate you supporting what I do here, and I will see you all, my friends, in the next video. Now go enjoy that lore.